Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Australia's only radio program that is totally dedicated to the Palestinian cause in English language. In today's episode, we will be speaking with a Palestinian activist visiting us from the United States, Huwaida Arraf. Stay with us and enjoy the episode. Good morning, Nasser.
Good morning, Yusuf. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. Nasser, tell us about our guest today.
Well, we're very lucky because we're going to be joined by Huwaida Arraf, a Palestinian-American woman and veteran civil rights activist. She has been active on the ground in Palestine, organising and participating in non-violent direct action, as well as leading legal activity to defend the legal rights of Palestinians and their advocates around the world. Most importantly, in 2001, she co-founded the International Solidarity Movement, ISM, a Palestinian-led non-violent resistance movement involved in activities like tearing down roadblocks and walls. We're very lucky to have her with us.
And without further delay, let's get started with our interview with Huwaida Arraf.
We were just talking about your entry into Palestine and the choice you had to make with your husband about the birth of your children. This is an experience many Palestinians have shared, whether they're from 48 or from the West Bank or Gaza or East Jerusalem. Can you take us through that story?
Sure. I have Israeli citizenship. Even though I was born in the United States, my father has Israeli citizenship because our village was taken over by Israel when it was created in 1948. But my parents left Palestine and I was born in America. But my father was able to give me the 48 citizenship or the Israeli citizenship, which has been very important because right now it's my only access into the country. Israel has tried to deport me for my human rights activism, and it's only because I have the citizenship and they haven't stripped it from me that they haven't been able to deport me and ban me. But they have banned my husband, who only has U.S. citizenship. And therefore, when we decided to start a family and I became pregnant, it became a real issue where I was going to deliver this baby. Is under Israeli law, and it is one of the racist laws, you can only pass on citizenship to a child born abroad for one generation. My father passed it to me, so I can't pass it to my kids unless they're born there.
And obviously, if you're not Jewish, that's only applicable to non-Jewish citizens.
Well, see, that's a very good question. This is one of their laws that is not discriminatory in its text, so it doesn't actually say that in the text, but it's in its implementation, it's discriminatory because it only affects non-Jews, because Jews anywhere in the world can come and get automatic citizenship, so it doesn't even matter. So if I wanted to pass along my citizenship, I had to go there and have the child. And so it became a question, do I give birth in the U.S. so my husband can be there for the birth of our first child, or do I go travel back home to Palestine, Israel, to have the baby? And my husband was very supportive and firm that no, we have to make sure that this child has papers so that Israel does not deny the child access to his homeland in the future and to his extended family. We tried for him to come with me. We both bought plane tickets, and we thought maybe they see I'm 9 months pregnant. Maybe we can say we'll put a bond down. He'll just be here for the birth and then leave. I need help. But they didn't. They arrested him at the airport. We filed an appeal with the court. The judge did not even listen to us for 5 minutes, and he denied the appeal. So Adam was deported, and I stayed. But now I did get the citizenship papers for my son, and later did it again for my daughter. So now they have the 48 citizenship, so they can't be banned in the future, hopefully. But, I hope that it doesn't even come to that. We keep saying our work today and spreading the word, and the activism that we're doing is so that we break down this, settler colonial racist system that does this to people. And so hopefully when they grow up, they don't even have to depend on that.
Hopefully it won't exist. So let's go back to 2001 and setting up the ISM. Take us through the thought process and how that happened.
Well, I was only one of a few people, so I can tell you my story. After I finished college, I decided to move back to Palestine, realizing that I had opportunities because my parents were able to leave. I was able to have a good education. I was able to have freedoms that I know my people mostly don't have, and therefore I wanted to see how I can contribute to my people's struggle. I moved to Jerusalem. At the time, it was to work for a conflict resolution program that brought together Palestinian kids and Israeli kids to dialogue. We were still in the Oslo peace process period. But after the second Intifada broke out, shortly thereafter, I resigned from this program. And it's not because I don't believe that people should talk to each other. We should always talk and dialogue as human beings, people to people. But I firmly believe that these programs are detrimental to our cause because they project the wrong message. It's not that, and we used to bring Palestinian and Jewish kids together. They used to become best friends, but then the Jewish kid would go back to his or her town or city, likely built on the ruins of a Palestinian village, and the Palestinian child back to his or her village or refugee camp under the gun of an Israeli soldier, which might very well be the sister or brother of the child they just became best friends with, and the projection, the message through these organizations is, just learn to dialogue and get along, and that's not it. You have to address the politics that is tearing people apart. And these programs generally don't do that, and therefore the focus is wrong, and it makes people feel good to participate in it and forget the politics. No, we have to address the root cause. So I'm firmly against these programs now, having tried them from the inside. But when the Intifada broke out, I was participating in the popular demonstrations. It was men, women, children, old, young, everybody protesting, not just Ariel Sharon's provocative visit to Al-Haram al-Sharif, but also over 7 years of a failed Oslo peace process that promised peace and an independent state, all the while giving Israel cover to continue its colonization, expanding settlements, demolishing Palestinian homes. So Palestinians said, enough. We don't want to be a part of this facade of a peace process. And the demonstrations continued, and the violence used against us was lethal. Israel unleashed lethal force against unarmed protesters, causing massive casualties, which inflamed people, more anger, more demonstrations, more deaths. By the end of the first month of the second Intifada, about 127 protesters had been shot dead, and it was mainly bullet wounds to the chest and head area, so Israel had a shoot-to-kill policy. For this massive violence, all the experience that we've had, the decades of struggle, and many more factors, including nobody holding Israel accountable, the mainstream media blaming us for our own death, saying Yasser Arafat turned us back on the peace process, we started the violence, not looking at Israel's violence against us, both systematic violence and the unleashed military force. The popular protests died down, and those with guns in the Palestinian factions were using them in a way that didn't make strategic sense. I mean, we're no military match for Israel, and so it gave Israel cover to fly their F-16s and then bomb our cities and roll their tanks in, causing even more casualties. This is where me, still looking for a way to contribute to my people's struggle, started talking to people about what can we do about the popular demonstration. We're not going to beat them militarily. And I learned more about the history of my own struggle and the very powerful movement amongst the people, the first Intifada. You study this when you study Martin Luther King or Gandhi. You don't see Palestine in your history books, even though throughout the decades we've used these tactics. And one woman who was very active in the first Intifada told me, Huwaida, you're right. Our strength is in our people and not in our arms. But we're tired from everything that we've seen, and it's got to be the young, your generation that carries it forward. So I thought maybe if we can globalize the Intifada, like call people from around the world to come stand with us. We can change the power dynamics. And that was the idea. I got together with some others, and we thought it would be wonderful if thousands of people came from around the world and we created this civilian army and blocked the Israeli military from rolling into Palestinian villages. At the same time, we didn't know if anyone would really come. I mean, it was a war zone, and it looked like on TV, and all of the casualties. And my parents were calling me from the States saying, Huwaida, come home, leave. And I said, Mom, Dad, I am home. I'm not leaving. But would someone who wasn't Palestinian come? We didn't know, but we tried, and we put out a call over email. And we didn't get thousands or hundreds, but we got about 50 people that came to our first campaign in August 2001. And those 50 people saw with their own eyes what was happening, helped us help Palestinian villagers dismantle roadblocks and march on checkpoints, and then went back home and told people. So if the mainstream media wasn't going to convey the information, people were going to create the truthful alternative media and create this alternative source of media, and more people wanted to come. And so we called another campaign, and more people came. And that's how it went. Now internationals, if people can travel to Palestine, what they really help us do is, one, stand with Palestinian protesters side by side in the hopes that the Israeli military won't use lethal force. They have, of course, but it is less when you have international eyes watching. Two, we're sending also a message to the mainstream media, like, look, listen, this isn't Jewish versus Muslims and Christians, or Israelis versus Palestinians. This is freedom versus occupation and colonization and oppression, and therefore, no matter your background from around the world, you can come and stand with the Palestinian freedom struggle. Three, you go back home. You tell other people. You create campaigns to change the way these governments are in support of Israel. And four, you really help break the isolation that Israel's policies impose on Palestinians, who see that they're up against this massive force and military might that wants their land without the people. And they are killing people off, moving them large scale, and you see that the world isn't doing anything about it. But when you see people coming and saying, we see and we hear you and we stand with you, it's a powerful message that I think helps in the resistance and the steadfastness. That's what the ISM does. That was back in 2001, our first campaign. Now it's been 16, 17 years. Over 10,000 have come through, and from all over the world, and they're back in their home countries working on boycott, divestment, sanctions, other campaigns to bring pressure from the outside, and supporting the Palestinian resistance that way.
Huwaida, you of course came to America. You came from America to Australia, and I'm sure you've shared with us in the conference or with other people in Australia some lessons from the pro-Palestine dynamic somewhere else, because every country is a unique country when it comes to how they maybe promote the Palestinian struggle. And I'm sure you've come to know or learn a bit of the Australian pro-Palestinian dynamic. What's one thing you can share on this, the difference in how different countries promote the Palestinian struggle? Maybe one thing you would like to share with our listeners about the difference in pro-Palestinian dynamics in different countries.
I don't know if this is going to answer your question directly, but I've heard since I've got here that, oh, you guys do great stuff in the U.S. We're not as active here. Maybe we can learn from what you're doing in the United States. And I've talked about some actions in the United States, which are great. But I think what's happening here is good too. I think each country has to look at the various ways in which their country is supporting Israel. In the United States, there's so much because the United States gives Israel so much military aid and also political cover. I mean, they just led to not passing a UN General Assembly resolution, Security Council resolution to condemn Israel's violence against our people in Gaza. It's outrageous. But what's happening here is good too. And even if you feel that it's weak, our demonstrations might not get that many people, know that it is having an impact. And I think the important thing is that we're all connected on social media now. We see what the others are doing in different countries. We can get ideas and inspiration. And most important is that they can also see us in Palestine and know that they're not alone and people are raising their voices. And how we raised our voices just in these last few months, for example, over the arrest of Huwaida Tamimi, that helped her get a much lesser sentence than she would have otherwise gotten. It's still atrocious, but if people didn't raise their voices around the world, she would have gotten many more years. And she's saying now, focus on the other Palestinian children in this Israeli military court system. One thing that we are really pushing, and which I spoke at Australian universities about, is the different ways that the students can take up boycott and divestment, because this is what our student groups in the United States are focusing on, looking at the university's investments, their investment portfolios. Are they invested in companies that are complicit in the occupation? And the focus has been on U.S. companies like the Caterpillar bulldozers that demolished Palestinian homes, that killed an American activist with our movement, Rachel Corrie. We've marked 15 years last month since her death. That was a Caterpillar bulldozer. Motorola and Hewlett Packard, these are all also, they provide the electronics for the Israeli military. And passing resolutions on the student government level, which then goes up to the university level. And at the university level, the administration, they veto them, or they say we're not going to do this. But the fact that it's getting debated and passed and students are getting interested and they're holding widespread debates, and then these resolutions are passing, it's big. It's big in that it's part of the education, it's part of the building alliances on campuses where the movements for social change are strong, and it's big in sharing this information that more and more people agree with sanctioning Israel, and this is the way people can do it around the world. So I think great stuff is happening in Australia. If the universities can pick up more what we're doing in American universities, that would be great.
So we touched on there the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. The only, I feel personally, the only effective movement for our liberation is an international coalition coalesced around those three things: boycott, divestment and sanctions. In the United States now, you've got legislative work. The Zionists, our enemies, are legislating to make it illegal to call for boycotts, divestments and sanctions. You're a lawyer. Can you take us through the challenges you're facing now and the current state of play with respect to that legislation?
Yes, it is really shameful that our elected representatives are still in the pockets of the Zionists, and therefore they are passing this legislation. About half of the states in the U.S. now have some form of legislation against boycotting Israel. They'll be fine with boycotting, U.S. states. You can boycott North Carolina for having a discriminatory laws, but you can't boycott Israel, but not Israel. It's really shameful. Some of these have been passed. Most of them have been passed at the legislative level. Some of them have been passed through executive orders, like in New York and in Texas. It's the governor that has passed these executive order. And they vary in terms of the sanctions on people that do engage. And there's one at the federal level now that has so many senators that have signed on to it that makes it criminal to boycott Israel. It's been through a change. In its original form, you could be fined up to $1 million and face up to 20 years in prison. Now they removed the 20 years in prison part and inserted some other language, but it remains, and all civil rights organizations declare that it remains unconstitutional to pass these kinds of laws restricting people's ability to, basically people's political speech. What our job now is trying to get them not passed in the states that they have not been passed in, and at the federal level. In the states that they have passed in, we haven't taken them and can't necessarily take them to court until they affect somebody practically. They have had a practical effect in 2 states so far, one of them being Kansas. There was a Kansas teacher who generally gets states contracts to do some teaching, and the latest contract that she was supposed to sign wanted her to say that she is not engaged in a boycott of Israel and will not engage in any kind of boycott of Israel according to the law that was passed in Kansas. And she, according to her conscience, could not sign it. And also she's an active member of the Mennonite Church, which has passed a divestment resolution. And therefore, She was represented by the American Civil Liberties Union, which took it to court. And at the end of January, a federal judge declared that this law is unconstitutional, and therefore there's an injunction now banning the enforcement of this law. It might be appealed, but we won that first stage. And there's a similar case right now in Arizona, and I believe it'll be a similar outcome. And when it starts affecting people, we will take it to court then. Because what these legislators, supposedly representatives, shamefully are doing are putting Israeli interests above the constitutional, the basic rights of the American people. And the first of those is free speech.
The reality, and I've spoken to some people about this as well, is I think there actually exists an opportunity. I mean, Bob and Mary from the Burbs have got no idea about Palestine and Israel. But the minute you say to Bob or Mary, if you choose not to buy this product, or if you choose not to associate with that lecturer, that you've got the possibility of $1 million fine or 20 years in jail or whatever, Bob and Mary are going to say, what the F? And why are you doing this to me? And, I mean, it's going to be counterproductive. Is that the feel over there?
Definitely, it is an opportunity to highlight the power of the pro-Israel lobby, the Zionist lobby, and what it is that it's able to allow our to basically get our representatives to put Israel's interests above those of the American people. And so it is a teaching opportunity, and we are mobilizing like that through our networks to get average citizens to contact their members of Congress and to say, what the F, you shouldn't be doing this. And we hope to build the pressure, and there have been some town hall meetings, not specifically around this, but around other issues where this has been raised, and the member of Congress has been left looking foolish, really. And there was one specific case that we put it on social media of people, activists in New York, that confronted Senator Gillibrand and said, well, do you know what you're supporting? And even though there was only a handful of Palestinian human rights activists in the room, when they called this out, applause throughout this town hall. So you see that even, average American citizens that, like you said, the average lay people supported this stance of, no, the senator should not be supporting this bill like this. So you're absolutely right. It's a teaching opportunity, mobilizing opportunity.
Let's go back to Huwaida. You were born in exile, like most of us, like Nasser, myself, and most of the Palestinian population. And you are a mother of 2 children. May Allah bless them for you. And I guess my question is, when your parents conveyed the message of Palestine and identity building, and now I can see you wearing a scarf with Arabic calligraphy, which is like a bit of a statement, also visual statement, which is also, as a person who appreciates Arabic language, and there's also a tattoo in Arabic, that's fantastic. So I guess Palestine, I guess my question is, now you were at the receiving end of that at a stage from your parents, and now you are at the giving end of identity building, and also 3 generations in exile in diaspora. What did change, and to what extent this mission is more difficult with more generations are being born in exile? I guess this is a very broad question, but I want you to elaborate on this issue of identity from your personal reflection.
Sure. My parents very much held on to Palestinian Arab traditions and culture raising us in the United States. So we're very strict on us, but not very political. And I think they were afraid for us in that way. They used to take us back to Palestine every 1 or 2 years to maintain the connection with our land, until a certain point when I was old enough to really realize the discrimination that we faced at the airport, the fact that we were separated and strip searched. At one point, my father stopped going back to Palestine with the family. And when I became a high school and I could travel by myself, I did, mainly because of I wanted to see family. My father, though, wouldn't go back. And it was a very sad thing, because at one point his sisters and brothers were saying that my grandfather didn't have much longer to live. You should come see your father before he passes. and my father wouldn't go. And the next time he stepped foot in Palestine was to attend his father's funeral. And I thought that was just tragic. So even though I wasn't raised very politicized, I became politicized from what I saw. And I decided that I was going to try to study the region and diplomacy. I went to study at Hebrew University for 1 year, and I saw just how Israel builds its ambassadors and builds its programs and indoctrinates people. And I thought that, we have a tough challenge in terms of where we are and where they are along the spectrum, but we have to fight it because this is our lives and our children's lives. So when I became more politicized, that scared my family, and they were saying, focus on your life, don't do that, get married, have kids.
Like many other parents who are worried about the future, want to protect them.
Exactly. But I tell them that, and I understand that my parents left Palestine because they wanted their family, they wanted me to have opportunities that I wouldn't have living under occupation or as a third-class citizen inside 48. But in one way, I also blame them. I said, you gave up on Palestine, you left, and that's exactly what they want us to do. Not everybody has to do what I did, but the important part is to keep the memory and the attachment to Palestine, because people contribute in all different ways. And as long as we continue to remember and do what we can for Palestine, they will never win. And so even though my kids are now only 3 and 4 years old, I started when they were babies telling them about Palestine. And so now my 3-year-old daughter will say, she'll ask what happens, why this is happening, and I'll explain in simple terms. And she said to me once in the car, Mama, they took our country. And I said, yes, they did. And she said, well, we have to fight them, Mama. Yes. And I said, yes, we have to fight, Mama. And she tells me, we have to put on our superhero costumes and fight them. And I'm glad that she has that spirit and knows that there is an injustice and there's something we all have to do. And we all have a role to play in that fight. And a part of it is making sure that we constantly pass down the attachment and don't forget, which is exactly what the Zionists want us to do.
I think we have a room for one more question.
Just very quickly, I think your parents did a pretty good job. Okay, so forgive them. My children, when they were little, the only understanding they had of the city was demonstrations and free Palestine. And this one day we were going to see a movie in the city, and we were driving, and the highway sort of turns left, and suddenly you can see the city. And my eldest said, Baba, free Palestine? He was going to another march? He was 3 years old. He's like, am I going to get the megaphone? Just to finish off our interview, we're still running programs in Palestine with the International Solidarity Movement. How can our listeners get in touch and get involved and help?
Thank you for that question. I think, as we discussed, one of the most effective ways to get involved is to join local groups that are doing work on Palestine. And I know in Australia you have quite a few of them, because they have taken up initiatives, efforts, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions call. And I say that because the pressure does have to come from outside. Inside Palestine, Israel has us completely choked off. And what's important is that the people stay steadfast. And we can do the demonstrations and the civil disobedience inside the occupied territories. But we see how they shoot at us with no repercussions in Gaza and in the West Bank. They're doing that. What we're doing inside is not going to end it alone. It's got to come from outside, and one of the most effective ways is to turn Israel into a pariah state until the system crumbles. So with the ISM, Palestinians would love if you come to Palestine. But when I myself was devastated about having to leave because my husband can't get into Palestine now, and I don't want to separate my kids from their family, from their father, I take them back to Palestine, but now I have to be based in the U.S. and my friends in Palestine know how devastated I am over that, but they say the important work is outside. So yes, come if you can, but don't feel like you have to go, either with the ISM or when we were running boats to Gaza. People asked how they can be on a boat to Gaza. it's not about being on the boat. It's about the work that you can do to raise the profile of what's happening back home. If you want to join the International Solidarity Movement, please do look up. You can Google International Solidarity Movement, or the website is palsolidarity.org, all one word. There's a section there on how you can join. But don't feel like you have to drop everything and go. There's something each one of us can do every day of our lives to contribute to the struggle.
With this, we have come to the end of our episode today. We've spoken with Huwaida Arraf, and until we meet next week, same time, 9:30 in the morning, this is Nasser and Yusuf wishing you the best of time, and salam.
And have a great day.